So welcome everyone. I am Sharon, if you don't know me. I'm speaking to you from the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Musqueam people, and very grateful to be here, and also very cognizant of the systemic, historical, and ongoing violences that allow me to be here. And I know we're going to talk about these things, especially in this session today. So I just want to say how grateful I am to everyone who is participating, who submitted a video, and I'm very excited for the next 2 days. I think what we'll do is start with a round of just brief introductions for everyone here, who you are, maybe where you are, and then we'll move on from there. So maybe whoever wants to start, I'll tag someone maybe, and then you can tag the next person and we'll go like that. So how about my accomplice, Dale?
That means I have to find the unmute button. Hi, I'm Dale. I'm in Vancouver on Musqueam territory. My research is in the history of international student policy in Canada, or at least in Canada now, and examining pathway colleges emerging to manage international students or attract international students. Maybe Kumari could go next.
Hi everyone, Kumari Beck, currently living on Kwantlen land and working at Simon Fraser. Good to see everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to pass for now. I'm exhausted from 2 days of being in mediation, and yeah, I'm just here, really happy to be here.
Kumari, do you want to tag someone?
I'm going to tag Jian.
There it is. Hi, I'm Jian. I'm a PhD student in intercultural communication doing a guest sort of research exchange at University of British Columbia in Vancouver with Sharon. And I suppose I will tag Clarissa.
Hi, I'm Clarissa. I'm speaking from Brazil, from the south of Brazil, where, as you probably know, we have been badly dealing with the whole pandemics, and you know, we recently went over 1,000 deaths a day due to COVID-19. So this has really occupying my mind and, you know, my whole self lately. But in terms of internationalization, my concern is mainly with the role languages play or do not play in the process sometimes, and especially with the use of English as an international language and the privileged language in internationalization. Okay, so I think I'm going to tag Roxana.
Thank you, Teresa. Hi, everyone. Talking from Makanda, formerly known as Grahamstown, a semi-rural town 1 hour away from Port Elizabeth. I am in the Isi-Kosa land. Yeah, happy to be here. And I'm gonna tag Max.
Hi everyone, I'm Max Crumley-Effinger. I'm a PhD student at Loyola University, Chicago, and I'm currently living in Indiana in the US. And I'm studying comparative and international education with Blanca, who I will tag next.
Hi everyone, happy to be here. My name is Blanca Torres-Olave. I'm an assistant professor at Loyola University, Chicago. And we are in the Three Fire People territory. Very happy to be here. I'll tag Karen.
Hi everyone, nice to see. Hope says I'm still muted. Can you hear me? No, I'm not muted. Okay, nice to see some dear familiar faces out there. And I just wish we were together and I could give you a big hug. And also some new faces. Nice to meet you, those of you who don't know me. I'm Karen Pashby, and I worked on the Ethical Internationalization of Higher Education project that many of us were involved in, and so did some work with Sharon and Vanessa and our dear, unfortunately departed friend, Michelle Nicholson, together working on the heuristic and social cartography for that. Since then, I've been working here at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm actually in Padfield, a small town outside of Manchester at the moment. And my work more recently has gone a little bit back to my roots as a secondary teacher and looking at how we take up some of these issues in the way global issues are taken up in secondary classes. Hi, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. And I wish we were together, and I will tag Amy.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's, can you guys hear me? Yes, okay. It's really wonderful to see you all and to be with such great friends and new acquaintances. And I want to thank Sharon for bringing us together. I'm talking today also from Musqueam territory. I live on campus at UBC, and right outside my window is a construction project of new housing that, you know, it's continually kind of carving into the forest and not being done with particular ethical principles involved in terms of recognizing the true owners of the land and or stewards of the land and our connection to the ecology that we live within. So it's something that I wake up to every morning, and it's it begins this kind of, well, what can I contribute to this dialogue? What can I contribute from my position to hold this institution accountable and other institutions as well? So I'm still learning a lot, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I am going to tag Tatiana.
Thank you, Amy. Hi. My name is Tatiana Suspitsina. I'm Associate Professor in Higher Education and Student Affairs program at The Ohio State University. We are located in Columbus, Ohio, and the city with such a legacy of colonial imagery. It's a remarkable place to be because we have seen changes in the physical landscape of the city. For example, the statue to Christopher Columbus that was located at the centrally located campus of Columbus State Community College has been removed after years of student and staff requests. Like in many other places in the US now, we see educational organizations responding quite swiftly to the issues that they had safely ignored for years. So it's an exciting time to observe changes here. That's a very long introduction. My interest in internationalization studies are prompted by not only my background as a former international student and somebody who was socialized in the American academe, but also someone who is interested in how various ideological regimes play out in maintaining the Western paradigms in research, in social science research. And I'm gonna tag Rupa.
Thanks, Tatiana. Hi, everyone. My name is Rupa, and I'm an associate professor in post-secondary education at York University in Toronto. So happy to reconnect with several familiar faces. So happy to connect with folks I've read about, whose work I've read, and I'm really excited for the next 2 days of conversation. So thanks, Sharon, for getting us all together. So I will tag Emma.
Thank you, Rupa, and hello, everyone. This is where the travails of turning up a little bit late for the start of a meeting. Are we just introducing ourselves? Thank you for the nodding. I'm so sorry to be late. The one time I'm this late. I'm Emma Sabzalieva. I'm finishing my PhD in comparative and international higher education at the University of Toronto. At some point, COVID permitting, I will defend my thesis, which is a historical account of how higher education responds to major change. So I'm thinking now about whether there are ways that I can take the empirical study that I did, or the more likely the kind of theoretical foundations of that study, and apply that to other things which are happening, which have an impact for higher education at the moment. I have to say thank you to Sharon for organising us in this way. And I really have enjoyed watching the presentations that are going to be discussed at the conference, and watching them on my TV. So you're all, whoever has put together presentations, you're all TV stars in my house now. Anyway, I don't know who hasn't been. Dale, have you been up?
I have been, yes, but there are a few people who haven't. So like,
okay.
On my screen, Stuart is right above you. Maybe Stuart.
Okay, well, Elizabeth raised her hand first, so I'm going to throw my ball over to the other side of Toronto to her.
Yeah, I thought the Toronto contingent can go. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Elizabeth Buckner. I'm also calling in from Toronto, which as we know, has been home to many different Indigenous groups, like the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and the Mississaugas, the New Credit, to name a few. I am a professor of higher education at OISE, and I really study sort of essentially like global models and how they become so normalized. And so I've studied how internationalization is one of many global models that has spread. And that's the way that I approach this. So it's actually very exciting to be part of such a community, because in many ways it's very new to me and different than my own training, which was much less critical. And so I really thank Sharon for inviting me, and I enjoy learning from all of you, and learning, and reading your work, and like Emma, watching the videos to learn from scholars who have a more critical stance. And so it's been wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I guess Stuart then can go next.
Hi, everybody. It's good to meet you. I'm Stuart. I'm calling in from London. I teach and work at the UCL Institute of Education for the last 5 years. But I am from Canada originally, and so while it's lovely to meet all of you on the screen, I'm very disappointed not to be able to be coming home right now. And not knowing when I can come home again, but that's the situation we're in. It's hard when we have family across borders at the moment. I was also late, so I have no idea who has not introduced. Is there anybody who hasn't introduced yourself? There we go. Andre, yes.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, it's getting late this side of the world. I'm in Port Elizabeth. The southernmost tip, not the southernmost tip, but part of it of our continent, and just to link in with some of the other contributors, land that belong to the Khoikhoi and San as indigenous people, and of course to the Xhosa later on, and was invaded by the British, in a range of 9 frontier wars. So it's part of the different sets of historical traumas that this part of the world has gone through. I am a professor here at Nelson Mandela University. That university has been renamed. It's been named after the metro, after a massive name-changing period in the post-1994 in South Africa, of course. And my field of specialization is in Africanization and critical university studies, or higher education transformation studies. And of course, I'm grateful to be part of this network, because I do think that via Sharon's formulation, some of the more critical questions of our times for higher education have been put on the table. So thanks for that, Sharon. Of course, I'm learning a lot as I move along with that. I'm also part of the university's administrative executive structure, as an deputy vice chancellor. So yeah, so I'm grateful to get the space and time to be involved in my scholarly interest. Thanks.
maybe we can have Sue go.
Shall I nominate Sue then?
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm calling in from the west of Ireland, and I'm based at the National University of Ireland in Galway, which was a university established in the 1840s during the Irish famine, which most people maybe know is a great cataclysm that reduced the population of the country to half of what it was. And I'm in the west of Ireland, which is one of the previously most populated areas and is now one of the most depopulated areas of the country, still like 150 years later after that. I'm also from this university that was created during this time as a kind of public works project by the British government. And after that was not terribly successful until slightly later in the 19th century, when it built up engineering particularly, and the sciences and applied sciences particularly, as part of fairly enthusiastic participation in the British Empire. So Irish people participated more per head of capita than English people in the British Empire. So I guess I just wanted to problematize my relationship to the place. And of course, I am what you call a new Irish. I became a citizen only a very few years ago. And I'm a sociologist. I work in the kind of area of development studies and human rights. I'm writing various things about the past and future of development and human rights. And I've also got a project on higher education. I'm particularly interested in the right to education and how higher education is part of any rights at all, if any. So I have a project on thinking critically about higher education and how we can bring equity and equality into the mission of higher education through the Trojan horse of quality. So that's my new interest at the moment, my project. So sorry for a very long introduction.
Do you want to tag some?
I don't know who else is there.
No. Sarah hasn't gone.
Okay, Sarah. Then I'll tag Sarah if she hasn't gone.
No, I haven't gone. Thanks, everybody. And I'm sorry I'm late. I'm speaking to you from my phone because my computer's been really, really problematic. So my name is Sarah Amsler. I'm calling in from not too far away from Sue, calling in from the northeast of England. I'm an associate professor at the University of Nottingham in the School of Education there. And my interest in internationalization is the role of educational institutions internationally in maintaining these, but also especially normalizing injustices and violences that underpin them. And I've had an interest in that through various forms of international, so transnational educational reform and things. I'm so late that I don't know who hasn't been tagged. Sharon or someone, can you tag somebody else, please? It hasn't gone.
Well, I was distracted by trying to get you and Sue in, so I'm also not sure.
I think that's everyone, but I could be wrong.
Anyone? Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Normally, I'm pretty good at that thing. So I think I'm just going to say now that maybe we'll plan to go about 15 minutes over because the intros, I'm bad at estimating these things, took a little bit longer than I had thought, which is great because we're not meeting in person. We need this kind of thing. But if you have to go, of course, then you can go when you need, anytime. But I think I'll hand it over to Sue, Sarah, and Roxana.
Okay, so Sarah's going to go first. Is that it?
Sarah.
Or does Roxana, because I was kind of
yeah,
going to...
what am I doing? Sorry. I'm raising questions about the presentations and things.
Yeah, that's it. You're just reflecting on the presentations and things. Yeah.
That's all. Okay, great. So I really thank you so much for the presentations. I hope my line is okay. It's quite bad on my end, so if I break up and you can't hear me, just let me know. I really, really enjoyed and valued the presentations and also the feedback that's been given in the past couple of days. So you sent some really rich feedback about our presentations. And I felt there was a lot of resonance in that collectively the presentations really raise and highlight some, I think, of the issues that I'd like to be most discussing in terms of pushing an agenda for critical internationalization studies forward. I think they're really fruitful ones. Roxana, I think I resonated quite a lot with the questions you had about understanding the deep roots of your inner coloniality and your inner colonizer, and obviously we're positioned differently in sort of the transnational space and in the political economy of the world system. And it just, I was really sort of interested in how you mapped out how that worked for you and the process that you went through in order to come to those questions for yourself, and the question of how to make visible the legacy of the colonial project on your own academic praxis is something I think is a super important and valuable question. And you know, it's one that I don't feel I yet have practices for. I think there are concepts, you know, and we develop practices, but I'd really be interested in hearing about more of the practices that you've developed to explore that more, and who you're doing that with. So I found that really valuable. And Sue, yeah, the whole framework that you have about repair and disrepair, I find really compelling and really provocative, and it really, I think a lot of times we think about investing or disinvesting or abolishing or maintaining or recovering, and the word repair brings a whole different dimension to what we're talking about, I think. And I feel like also you bring a bit, maybe sacred isn't the word you used in your own work, I don't know, but you bring a bit of, you brought a bit of the sacred to it for me, and thinking about the beautiful and the noble and what is worth repairing. And I think you raised some very, very good questions about my presentation in terms of and I'm sure you'll articulate them better yourself, but just to sort of, you know, say a little bit about that now is, you know, I think the questions you raise are good questions about what disinvestment means, and disinvestment, sort of whether this is an economic disinvestment or an affective and psychological one, and thinking about the different discourses of disinvestment that we have to work with, and how actually when we think about disinvestment, and I think what I'd like to explore more with people for a long period of time is, are there other options outside of that? You know, if we put on the table as well as what's reparable, and trying to discern what we can repair and what ruins we can work in within our institutions, what really is beautiful and valuable and important and necessary, and also put on the table what might not be reparable, and sort of, I think that's what my presentation is interested in exploring, is what might not be reparable and what consequences does that have, but kind of holding back from the idea that it has necessary consequences. Like, I actually think that, you know, disinvesting from certain promises of the welfare state, for example, doesn't mean space. You know, it might, you know, thinking about, you know, where people have the possibility to be educated in a meaningful way, and to feel joy and to be in a natural environment in a natural way. You know, are there other ways we can do that sort of, you know, use the gifts of what we have and the benefits, and also reduce some of the harms. So I just found the idea of repair really, really an interesting one to think with. I think I'll stop there and give somebody else.
Okay, well, I'll let Roxana, because I can talk long and I don't want to, you know, so I would like to let Roxana go next so that I don't take all her time, you know.
Thank you. And I just want to put my video. I'm concerned because of the internet connection here gets a little bit tricky. Well, I'm going to start first referring to Sarah's presentation. It was really compelling to me how evident she presented the contradiction and the circularity complex. And it resonates deeply in the heart. Because when we can intellectualize and go to the theory and show, when it seems that we know the North or the South, and the attachment with the desires, with those things that we don't want to let it go. And I am trying to embrace in practice what I preach. And it gets very complicated. Because the contradiction is evident, but then where are those spaces? And what I am practicing is trying to stay rather than to run away with a specific solution. And it gets harder and harder when you see when there is urgency in the place where I am, to get things done in many different levels. So thank you so much, Sarah, for that. For showing that so eloquently. So your presentation also made me to think in how much I have defended the public university and what I believed in my roots. Public university in Chile was almost the solution of many problems. And I really enjoyed the phrase when you say, well, there is a hope for this public, for repair the public sense, that can generate the possibility to see others in full dignity, and treat others in that, where everyone can embrace their full potential. What I grappled from both presentation and also, I think Sarah mentioned it was the exercise of remembering. Sarah, I really enjoyed a part of your presentation when you say, what is it that we haven't put the conceptual framework when we're analyzing our common problems in that colonial history? And when you mentioned the pedagogy of failure, so the need to remember all the failures that we have gone through our attempts. There is a pedagogy there. I am not sounding that articulated. What I'm trying, I am showing how I'm thinking of the conversation, and the decision that I'm embracing is trying to stay with the discomfort rather than to rush. And that is extremely hard because of the pressure, especially when you're starting a career in a different place, to come out with solutions or show, and getting deeply in the hard zone is the egos and the fears that also are inhabiting with us and that are not separated from the places where we are located and from the roles that we are playing. I think I let you go first, and then I can go back perhaps to the inner colonizer and how I am grappling with those notions. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, all right. Yes, okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Roxana, and thank you, Sharon, for inviting me into this space. And I want to follow on from what Roxana has said by going back to a problem which I first started to talk about a year ago in Andre's space, which was not far from where Roxana is. And this relates to being part of reproducing the problem and being kind of going in a circle of being the problem, and the problem reproduces itself. And there's this incredible urgency in South Africa to get away from things and to make sure the transformation is happening. And I first broached the idea of repair in this context when it was really interesting that, especially in the more Western high-income countries, people have been really keen. I just gave a similar talk to this in Manchester only a few days ago, and the resonance of the idea of repair, and this sense that Sarah gets that this is something sacred or something soulful in the idea of repair that has spoken deeply to people, and is something that people somehow need to hear or to visualize. And in South Africa, it was loads of, especially the younger scholars, saying, smash the thing, just be done with it. So this question of repair the vase, I used the artwork by Ai Weiwei where he takes this ancient Han Dynasty priceless vase and he smashes it. And yeah, so, and people were kind of energized by that, this idea of smashing higher education. And then, you know, where would you be with this idea of repair? So I like this concept of maybe this contradiction of mending, but also getting away from it and coming back again, or maybe not coming back again, maybe just leaving the pieces there. My main issues, I think, with the whole question of disinvestment that Sarah powerfully raised, and I want to thank this network and Sharon and all my friends and colleagues who've been part of this network for constantly pushing me to be critical in this way, this very uncomfortable and difficult way. To think about, you know, what should we invest in? What should we disinvest from? And my difficulty really is, you know, a 20-year-long war intellectually against neoliberalism in higher education. And the reason why I came up with this idea of the fixes was to distinguish a fix from a repair. A privatizing fix is the opposite of a public repair. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention or to pick up on. Then to go back to this, you know, what we can hope for or not hope for, what should we invest in or what shouldn't we invest in? This complicity question that everyone has raised for this conversation is awfully difficult. And it's particularly difficult because I'm where I am in this. That's why I gave this long, stupid introduction about, you know, the university that was built in the famine that nobody wanted and then made so much money from. Because, of course, Chile and South Africa and Ireland are not really the peripheries of the peripheries, but they are these kind of semi-peripheries, spaces where complicity and double dealing are even more visibly constitutive. I think that, you know, complicity and double dealing are always constitutive, but yeah. So I'm really suspicious. But on the other hand, this pandemic has brought totally to the fore that public health of all things, but everything public, from public education to public research to public toilets. I mean, these are wanted parts of the world. And they're wanted, in my view, because they are spaces where people can still encounter each other in a way that is humanizing and that it affords them the possibility to be equals. That doesn't mean that they really become equals. If you think about being in a public park like Central Park and the whole Amy Cooper story, but anyway, I won't go into that. But yeah, I do still think that these common spaces are things that I still want to hope for and invest in. And I don't want to unhope or disinvest from them. And this is why I was, you know, really interested in what Sarah had mapped out in her presentation. And I really felt that I was really stuck in the reclaiming the university imaginary or frame of thinking. And I asked myself why that is. And it's because I feel absolute utter rage about disinvestment and the cunning way in which states have disinvested in higher education and turned their back on widening inequalities and allowed democracy to turn into oligarchy and all the casual violence that goes with it. So the imaginaries of disinvestment have gone along with just allowing the ultra wealthy to hoard incredible amounts of wealth and plunder public goods and derelict the public sphere. So yeah, it's not that I'm not worried about complicity. I'm very worried about complicity. The complicity of decoloniality is something that should be worried about. And I also think that, well, this new interest that we have, I mean, it's not really a new interest in decoloniality. This is the second decolonial turn that we have seen in social theory and cultural theory. But during the first decolonial turn, inequality increased, and so did injustice. So I'm concerned about that. And then just, I suppose, going back to what might be Sharon's provocative questions. What's stopping us from disinvesting and unhoping? Well, I think some of the complicity that I have in hope and the trafficking that I do in hope and all the plasters I keep putting on hope to make hope less cruel, even though the university keeps trying to kill us and drive us mad, is because the things and the people produced by this hope are things we need, things we love, things that are beautiful, things that are for justice. And so, you know, I don't want the theory of the abyssal line and the 0 point, which are really important in undoing epistemic injustice. I don't want that to make us think that there is only one 0 point. There can be more than one 0 point. So I don't advocate for disinvesting from the important historical and intersectional struggles that constitute the decolonial demand. And these are not just the indigenous struggles for land or Black struggles for their lives mattering, but they are the struggles of socialist internationalism for decent standard of living, of third worldism for sovereignty and resource sovereignty and fair benefits, of feminism for gender justice, the anti-war movement for peace and ecology for the planet. And, you know, I don't think that we can forget those things. So yeah, I'm sorry if that's complicated, but yeah, maybe I'll just stop there.
So maybe what we can do is actually now do another round for everyone who watched the videos and see they maybe have questions or just responses and to the videos or to this topic in general. And I think maybe I'll start since I'm already talking. I think what these series of videos and their distinct kind of perspectives really remind us is that when we talk about the critical, we are inviting in a whole range of perspectives and investments and desires. And I think holding that complexity and all of those tensions and maybe being able to sit with them as well instead of trying to resolve them or kind of defend our positions can be perhaps really generative. So I think, you know, this group is actually a great place to practice that and to practice, you know, sitting with our immediate affective and intellectual responses and ask what those things are teaching us. And I always, especially with the, you know, beyond reform, disinvestment perspective, when I frame it for people, it's always an invitation. It's just a reminder that I'm not asking you to believe or agree with me. I'm asking you to sit with this thing, hold space for your responses, ask what you're learning from your responses, and maybe what this thing can teach you. Whether you agree with it or not at the end, you know, that's up to you. That's your autonomy. But to see what it's bringing up, and I think, you know, we can all do that from about the perspectives that make us tense up. And that might be as generative as sort of dialoguing about these things. So I'm just putting that invitation out there really for the whole conference actually, to sit with especially the things that make us uncomfortable or make us kind of have this immediate no response or to see what it might be teaching us, what our responses might be teaching us. And before I pass, I think I'll pass it to Lisa, actually, just so she can introduce herself. And then, so just a reminder, what I'm inviting us to do is, if you have a question about the presentations or a response to the videos, and I would always emphasize offering something that is for the collective learning of the group. So there's sort of like individual processing and collective processing. So I invite something that you think will be generative for us to think with as a group. And if you have individual responses that might not be relevant to everyone, you might hold those. But it's obviously up to you. So I will pass it to Lisa.
Thank you, Sharon. I think I'll just introduce myself for now. My name is Lisa Brunner. I'm a PhD student at UBC in Educational Studies, and Sharon is one of my co-supervisors with Vanessa Andriocchi.
Okay, does someone want to start then, since Lisa's going to pass on this round? Rupa?
So if it's okay, I'll just raise some of the questions and thoughts I had on each of the presentations, and we can take up any issue if there's an interest. So starting with Sarah, what really struck me is her focus on the concepts of modernity, because herein I feel lies the whole challenge in how we think about colonization or decolonization, because we are stuck in such an imagery of modernity that we can't seem to get out of it. And I think, I mean, we can't seem to escape that what we think is modern, and that's what's sort of putting us in this bind constantly. So I just wanted to think a little bit about this concept of modernity, and if and how we might have shifted our gaze in terms of modernity. The other aspect of Sarah's that I really found interesting is her quote, "A system cannot fail those that it was never designed to protect." It hit it on the nail, and I was like, we don't even acknowledge this, and that's part of the issue. We don't even acknowledge that our systems are not designed for those who we are trying to include right now. And so it connects to what Su-Ming Khoo brings up, and I'm just stuck on this concept of repair, because I'm not sure repair is what's going to get us where we want us to go. I just wondered whether, I love her analogy of repair in terms of the motif, and sort of thinking about repair in a dualistic way. However, I just wondered whether in thinking about repair, we're talking about sitting within existing frames. And again, going back to this concept of how is it that an institution that's never meant to serve or never designed to serve all is going to be able to repair itself. So I just sit with that. And I love her concept of quality, because especially in terms of internationalization of higher ed literature, I just find us so obsessed with this notion of quality without ever questioning what it is or why we feel the need. So I really appreciated her discussion of quality as being antagonistic in terms of how we take it up versus complementary. And the last issue I'd like to bring up for Roxana, I was really fascinated with your mention of committees for colonization at universities. I found that a very interesting concept, but I also wondered whether there's any link of these committees to work on internationalization, because I find it fascinating, especially in the Canadian context, how these constructs of internationalization and decolonization never speak to one another in our context. And so I'm very, very curious about these committees for colonization at universities, and if they had any kind of linkage internationally and how they work internationally as well as nationally. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Do you want to tag someone, Rupa?
Oh, for questions or comments? Yeah, Kumari.
Well, as I said, I'm sort of a bit stuck in having come out of this really hideous process of engaging with a university in terms of precisely those issues around quality, but also equity around workload, and especially in these times. And so this is where, Sue, I found your framework to be both hopeful in terms of, as you say, what it's not about disinvesting in everything we find about it, but at this point in time, looking at the ways in which the institution itself is set up, it is just not not possible to actually engage in a way, because at every point of engagement, you know, there are blocks, and so repair in this instance might mean having to make, and I kind of have this sort of like an odd metaphor of you know, how fashion designing, you know, you create rips in the fabric in order to bring in some other ways of adding more patches or qualities that we want to add to, you know, the material or the garment, which then possibly might take over. So I've been sitting with that metaphor of can we think of repair as more than you know, bringing back to its original form, or adding something that could change the form that we're engaging with, and coupled. So in association with that, I really resonated, Roxana, with the notion of bringing our colonizing selves into the mix. And I speak from the position of having been multiply sort of engaged in an education system. I mean, everything that I am is not who I present myself to be, in terms of the education system I've been through and the socialization that I've been through, and everything that I aspire to be in this world is from a colonial framework. And so even engaging for me with the notion of a critical internationalization studies is the fact that we're starting off with the notion of internationalization, which is in itself is everything about it is colonial and imperialistic. So so those are the two ideas that, and the questions that come up for me at this time. And I'll stop and tag Amy.
Thank you. Can you hear the construction noise outside, or should I close the window? Is it too much? Okay, good. I'm just so glad to see you all. I really wish, one of the attachments I have is that I really wish we were all together. And so there's this concern about obviously the environmental impact of our travel and what that's going to have in the future for the types of conversations we want to have, and then how we manage with these little hour blocks, right? And I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to do this flipped format. I think that it has allowed me longer engagement with some of your work, in the fact that some of the videos are things I can replay and look at them again. You know, they're not just this one-off kind of opportunity. And so I appreciate that. And of course, all of the written work that will come forward from this 2-day event. But I'm also missing the side conversations, the coffee conversations, having you all out to dinner, taking you to our favorite places on campus, questioning some of the places on campus, these embodied somatic experiences that we are not having right now together, as we're in our, basically I'm kind of at this makeshift desk next to my bed. It's not really my most comfortable place, and there's a loss there, right? So kind of thinking through what the loss of habits, particularly of travel and of conferencing and engagement with each other as humans, as thinking, Kumari, about our dinners together in Toronto, like those opportunities that we have when we're at conferences together, when we can let our guards down and be human and talk about our families, talk about our relationships, talk about our hopes for the future. So much of that is embedded in the conversations and in the videos from this session as well. So I'm not really sure what to do with that in terms of the disinvestment from those collegial attachments in that way, right? So how can I then not be that person, or do I have to think about being different in those spaces? Internationalization and international education in general brings us in contact with people that we will likely not see very often in our lives. And that itself is a conundrum, right? It's like putting the local in a particular position, putting the international in a particular position. And once you embark on that sort of trajectory of a career or habit of life, it is very difficult then to walk back from it, because your friendships, your colleagues, your students are then really remote in the best sense, perhaps, and the worst sense. So that's something I'm kind of grappling with this morning, thinking about what I wish we could be doing right now, and then trying to think about the benefits of what we are doing right now. So again, want to just thank everyone for experimenting in this way, right? And really trying to do something, trying to make the best of the situation. We also have to realize we're talking in the context of a pandemic, right? Like this is not our choice because of the pandemic, but we would have made other choices, right? We would have made other choices that were just as challenging, just not so much in the immediate future in terms of climate change, right? So we probably would have put that aside for the moment. And what does that mean about our future choices? So I'm gonna tag Blanca if she doesn't mind. I want to hear a little bit more about your process for this conference.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, first of all, I'm very much with Roxana, and I emailed you earlier this week, just to thank her for her presentation, for all of you, because right now I'm just processing I feel like I'm doing like the cognitive, the emotional, the somatic, all at once. And I feel incredibly grateful to know that it's kind of a safe space to do that. I know that the concept of safe space has its own place and stuff, but for me, it's just felt, in terms of these topics and stuff, it's been incredibly challenging, and I understand, I can't understand exactly, Roxana, where you were coming from, but it did reflect my own experience to a large extent, in the sense of, I know what it's like to come as an immigrant with all the privileges and all the contradictions and all the again, that word complicities of, what allowed me to be here in Chicago as a professor, and I cannot separate them from the physical sense of loss, of wanting to hold you all, to smell you, like we like you. There's no smell of vision, and humans need that, right? I mean, we are biological beings, and so. And at the same time, grappling with that other part of it, one of the things that I found incredibly moving, and I didn't realize I needed to hear it, was hearing Sharon's introduction to the conference, and then how this theme has played out in some of the other conversations about this notion of repair, but also what is irreparable, and that some things may not be reparable, and just how I was really shocked at myself at how comforting I found that notion, because I feel like so much of what I'm doing, in my daily practice and stuff, it's trying to hold that place of repair so that I can support my students, so that I can survive in academia. I just submitted my materials for tenure in May, in the middle of a pandemic. So holding that place of restorative for me, just personally. And at the same time, feeling that I'm embedded in certain structures that may just not be, like that I had the sense that they may not be fixable when I want to fix things, but that the policies and the discussions I have with colleagues here at Loyola, they're all about let's try to fix the structure. But just hearing that some of it may not be fixable, repairable in its current form was incredibly comforting, and it just made me feel in some ways seen and like I'm not losing my mind. And that's the place where I'm at right now, holding this. What's in our hands? And Max and I talk about that in our presentation about the notion of the handprint versus the footprint. But that the both of them need to be held together. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. It's a very, very physical and emotional type of processing that I'm doing, in addition to the cognitive. And do we have? Should I tag someone else, Sharon? Okay. How about Tatiana?
Thank you for sharing this, Blanca, and thank you, Sharon, for bringing us together. I should have started with that, but I was really excited to hear what people had to say today. And I enjoyed watching the videos, and I found myself, with each presentation, I found myself being immersed in a different language, in a different worldview. And to me, a lot of disciplines present their own languages, not just discourses and vocabularies, but also mental maps of the world. And what really interested me in these conversations about repair is that I think we need to ask the question of whose project is it that seeks to repair something? Because I think at present, we are witnessing different projects of repair. We have people who are trying to repair America to its particular time in space and in the past. And it's an attempt to buffer the foundations that are crumbling. And so, and I really want us to be cautious about this foundationalist move to repair. I'm not suggesting that the presenters today suggest restoring the foundations, quite the opposite. But I think in all of our conversations, we have to be attuned to this desire to change the structure, tweak practice, but leave the deeper questions of the foundations of higher education intact. For me personally, and I think for a lot of us who work as faculty members in higher education universities and sitting on multiple committees, and if you're doing any international work, the chances are that you'll be asked to serve on committees that has anything to do with internationalization. And as Sharon pointed in her overview of different internationalization model, universities mostly want to internationalize for commercial reasons and for the reasons of competitive. This is a neoliberal push to maximize the outputs. And so for me, these conversations also raise this very uncomfortable conflict within us, within me, myself in particular. How do I practice what I preach? I think that's what maybe Su-Ming talked about. Practice what you preach. How do we practice in life what we believe? What is it if what does it mean to question the foundations of internationalization when you're sitting on a committee that asks you to come up with a sensitive internationalization strategies? And I'm talking about personal experience. How do we resist being, how do we perform as academics and resist being complicit in the system? Is it even possible, or we're continuously co-opted by the system just because by virtue of being part of it? And so with internationalization, we are also tools of internationalization. And we are used as tools, and we make ourselves available to the institutions to be used as such tools. And so those are the questions that have to do probably with our reflections of inner colonialism and how we participate in that. But I think it's a serious issue that needs to be addressed as well. So all this ramblings is 2 points. Repair is about different projects, that some of them are hugely worrisome and dangerous. And the second is about our identity as academics. We are part of the problem we are trying to solve. Okay. I want to tag somebody. Kumari.
I've had a turn.
You had a turn. How about Jian?
So hi. I wasn't necessarily planning on speaking, but I did have a couple of points around the idea of repair. We keep coming back to this. And the point that the point of the reparative notion being somewhat foundationalist is actually quite interesting, because I had a little bit of a different take on it, and I wanted to kind of ask the group in terms of like generating collective processing, what we might think of the praxis around repair in terms of reparation. And so I was thinking about the United States context and kind of thinking about in terms of Black Lives Matter, in terms of universities in the South being much more likely to be closing in the upcoming budget issues that will most likely be striking us as we enter a more economic downturn. If thinking about the university has an influence on how we move forward in terms of specifically repairing racial relations, because obviously, like for me, my main focus is race and internationalization, and so I'm kind of thinking about moving from this sort of broader idea of repair and moving kind of like towards a very specific praxis-oriented approach. So that was just kind of the one thing that I thought about when I was watching these presentations. Oh, and to tag somebody, Dale is right next to me.
Thanks. I'm definitely going to pass, but I do want to say thank you to everyone for the videos and for the conversation. I mean, it's so fascinating, which is exactly why I'm going to pass. But part of this conference has been meeting new people or like discovering new people's work, and so maybe I can pass to somebody who I recently discovered their work, shamefully to me, which is Stuart. Maybe Stuart could add something.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I mean, picking up on what, it's Tatiana, is that right? Yes, Tatiana and Bianca has talked about, and our position as academics in the university. I think it's very telling that my reaction in terms of being at UCL IOE is constantly wanting to leave. And frustration with the struggles over all sorts of things, whether it's international strategies or other. And in the UK, this is following on a couple of years of mass mobilization, the biggest staff strikes and so forth. So I hear you on those things. But the point I wanted to kind of throw out there is something I've been wrestling with for a while, and I'm picking up on Sharon's comments about different kind of critical viewpoints. And then some of the discussion, I think, that was in Sarah's presentation and Sue's presentation about the different kind of stances, both intellectual and political stances we take with respect to the university. And I guess the kind of thing that I'm trying to wrestle with is what happens if the terrain shifts, and how we need to be attentive to that. And the kind of just some of the stuff that Sarah talks about, I've long been interested in some of these alternative universities and the Eco Universities Alliance and things like this, and see them as really exciting alternatives, and the kind of whole tradition of deschooling that a lot of those are inspired by. And kind of for my whole career, I feel like there's been this struggle against this elite discourse of expanding a particular market model of higher education. And the struggle against that is kind of to defend a public university or to kind of deschool and try and carve out alternative spaces. But my fear is that some, in places like the UK and I think North America, that some of that shifting, there's evidence that kind of elite discourses are no longer wanting to build up a university, even a market model one. And there's, so for example, in the UK, there's a push to move a lot of professional training out of the university altogether. Teachers, social workers, nurses, right? There's a push to not expand universities in the way that university enrollments in the way there has been for several decades. Promoting apprenticeships and all these kinds of alternatives. And so I guess my fear is sometimes we kind of build up these critical stances, both intellectual and political stances, in response to a kind of elite discourse. And then if we're not attentive to how that discourse starts to shift, then that can create all sorts of problems. And we did a piece last year on this deschooling issue, where kind of certainly recognize that the very same kind of ideas that you find in places like Uniterra and Swaraj and the Eco Universities Alliance are also being picked up in very right-wing libertarian circles as well, to kind of shrink the higher education. And it's trying to find our footing when the terrain is shifting, I think, is the kind of thing that I wrestle with. How are we doing for time, Sharon? We still have some time. Can I take Elizabeth?
Hi, everyone. I have to run soon too, but yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. But I guess I would say a couple of the things that I'm just thinking about it as I'm processing a lot of this conversation is really like the sort of, I think, I'm not sure who raised this, Tatiana, about this, like our role as academics, but it's also sort of, yeah, my role as an individual and as a person. It's, in some ways, like a lot of these conversations, like they're very abstracted, but they're also, the affective side is like, how should I live, essentially? Like, how do I live in this world, but also by my own values? And to what extent should I actually, like, what is the, so one of the things I think about is, yeah, like especially when we talk about an institution, I can't see my institution so separate from myself, and sort of like, well, if I was an administrator, like, is the institution, I mean, obviously it's institutionalized in processes, but the people in it are not so different from me. And so I often think about that in terms of they may just, is how, and especially in my program where I'm teaching, many of my students are the administrators at my university. And so, like, I think that we're on this, long-term process, but I think that, and the flip side of really sort of that modernity project of like that progress is possible and progress is desirable. In some ways, like for me, it's just like radical acceptance. And so I really am stuck in between, like how do we just say, okay, radical acceptance of the world versus how living by my values and wanting change. Like I really do get stuck in some ways in terms of what it means for how I live and how I act on my values in some ways, but also how I teach and educate and where to get involved in my institution as a whole. And so I would say that I don't have answers. I just get like stuck, and I appreciate the conversation to help process these.
I think maybe Max, are you the last person who's still here? Do you want to say anything? You don't have to.
I might be the last person who hasn't spoken yet. Something that I spent a lot of time thinking about was from Roxana's presentation, and how, as I understood it, thinking about what it means to try and make changes, critical changes, as a newcomer in a new institutional or national context. And I think about those things. Well, the reason that kind of stood out to me is because of my feeling of being a newcomer as an academic, because I'm still a PhD student and figuring out where I'm going to slot into hopefully an institution at some point in the future, and kind of trying to balance learning about the local with the new and potentially critical perspectives that I could bring to that new local context. And you know, the perspectives that I bring from learning from experiences like this or from my studies could be useful, but they also might be incompatible with the local context, or just not work based on my place within the organization, for example, in terms of power that I do or don't have. And so I think that is a challenge that I consider as I consider being in a new institution is, you know, if I have ideas, are they compatible with the situation? Are they not taking into consideration the local context? And so those are challenging questions that Roxana's presentation brought up to me, which I think were really exciting, but challenging.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that this conversation has made clear is that we need spaces like this where we are coming together across these different perspectives. I think it's also useful to remember that there's kind of like our theoretical and ethical kind of attachments and orientations, and then there's also the institutions we live in, and we're not always able to realize these horizons of hope within our current context, but we can ask, how can we reduce harm? I think we can all kind of get on the same page around that, and how can we be strategic, even though we might have different horizons of hope ultimately. That being said, I think it might be useful for us to have also parallel conversations. People who are drawn, for instance, to this question of, or the idea that maybe this is irreparable, find these conversations, the kind of questions that Sarah especially raised, a lifesaver, because they get this resonance like, okay, I'm not the only one thinking this. It is okay to ask these questions. For people who are more on the other side, they can be very almost triggering. So I think we need the conversations where we bring us together, but in order to go deep into our different approaches, I think we also need those separate spaces where we're not constantly doing the translation of things. So I think maybe one thing that could come out of these conversations this weekend is some sub-conversations that could be ongoing now that we're all used to Zoom, for better and for worse, so that we can dive deep into these things in the areas that we're drawn to. So I'll just pass it back to the sort of presenters for the last word.
Should we just do the same order? That's easy.
Indeed.
Okay. Just to say thank you so much to everyone. I do wish we could continue this conversation now together in a different way. Everyone has offered so much to think with, and I'm really glad this is being recorded as well, because I think there's a lot of rich material here that we can really dig into. not least of all for really deepening our collective accountability, intellectual accountability, emotional, spiritual, professional, political accountabilities to the ideas we're working with and what they move and why. So I'm really grateful for that. I will be doing a lot more work on some of the questions that were raised. And I just wanted to also throw in that I think this question of like, we live in a very, very compromised world, and we all also have to be in that world, and we are in the institutions. One, I think that that's a conversation by itself to have. You know, there's lots of people thinking with that in really interesting ways about purity politics and that sort of thing, but also just there are so many traditions of struggle and also traditions of healing that, you know, that take this as a foundational fact that we live in a compromised and oppressive world and have to be and become in it in ways that allow us to hold that complexity. And some of them, most of them, I think, are you know, like outside and in the university, certainly some of the religious traditions that have a lot to offer there, even to people who are secular. So I just think there's a lot that we can learn from, and I'm eager to do it with you. So I will pass over to Sue, who I think that was the order.
No, Roxana was next.
It was me. Yeah, thank you so much for all the heartfelt comments. Let me put it in that way. Two things that I would like to highlight. Before perhaps getting to understand my inner colonizer and dive into, I was very blind. And one of the things that I noticed that what gives me power is the possibility to confront my ideas and learn from others that differ fundamentally of me. What I miss when someone asks me how I put in things in practice, I'm terrified of speaking up and say how much racism I see around. Because I think that is not my, I shouldn't say that. And I'm like, I shouldn't actually say that because it's going to be recorded. But what actually I appreciate in the space where I am, how to put in practice, how to say, okay, I have this aim because I realize I'm living this process inside, how I didn't know about my indigenous root, why nobody told me about it, is that my discourse, my speech, my experiences are just what it took me, you know, that was my path. And it's the invitation, and I hear you so well, Sharon, it's like the possibility to stay with the discomfort and find, not necessarily trying to find an immediate fixing. And it's so easy to get in that mind, in that space, because we have been socialized to provide solutions.